Welcome to today's lecture. We're going to be discussing headlines. We're going to look at a few good examples of headlines and then some general principles about how you write good headlines. Now again, we're aiming for those top contracts that will bring in the most amount of money. So we definitely need to get the headline, not only a good headline, but a great headline that captures people's attention, like why models stay young till 60. A very good example. Another one. How to turn your child into a classroom wizard. So let's go through some of these notes that I've created and discuss each in turn. Here is a very good test when you have written out your headline. A good way to, a way to describe it would be a user test. If you're using software terminology. But essentially you just sit someone down for 5 seconds, very briefly, and ask them, what was this page about? Now I'm sure you can do this online very easily by what is your first gut reaction to this headline, and have them answer it within a couple of seconds. Next point is, and you can find this video, David Ogilvy, The View from Tufu, and I strongly recommend that you watch all the videos that you can on David Ogilvy. He's one of the most incredible marketing directors that the industry have seen, and he recommends use 6 to 12 words in headlines. We'll come back to David Ogilvy in a second. Another principle, the principle of negation. I'm going to read this first sentence. As a general rule, a negative sentence tends to be more difficult to process and understand than an affirmative sentence. Very interesting. Negative sorts such as not, never, less than have been shown to increase the time necessary to comprehend a sentence. Therefore, as a rule, it is generally desirable to avoid using negatives. Keep that in mind when you're crafting your headlines. Now, you can also have bad news headlines to entice people. Now, you may not be able to read what it is, but the bad news headline, if I can find it, let me pause the video for 1 second. So it's a little hard to read, but I can distinguish. Don't buy anything from this website. The official link you should not buy from. So a bit of reverse engineering as well, which can work on occasion. It's certainly not a tactic that you can overuse. It can get stale quite quickly when people figure out the game. Again, Ogilvy, be sure that your headline is easily understandable at a glance. So again, don't use negatives. Use positive language and easily understandable. This is a great example. I got drunk and tried Muji's new relaxation app. I would not recommend it. Beautiful. Beautiful. It's enticing. It's very, very curiosity evoking. So, an example of a very good headline that I would add if you have a swipe file, and I recommend that you keep up a swipe file for inspiration. Whenever, and in fact, let's set that as the homework assignment. I want you guys to find 5 examples of headlines that you just absolutely love and share them in the discussion section of this video. And we can share these ideas and we can analyze why those 5 headlines that you selected may or may not be great headlines. So continuing. Let me zoom in. A situation reveals a painful gap of our knowledge. That's the headline. And we feel an urge, this is creating a vacuum, to fill this gap and ease that pain by clicking on the headline. So I got drunk and tried Muji's new relaxation app. I would not recommend it. Why? What happened? What happened to you that you would not recommend it? And that is the gap that we are discussing here. The gap in our knowledge that we want to fill. That's why that previous example is such a good example of a great headline. Again, the sex life of the female fruit fly finally gets the attention it deserves. Now, implicit in this headline is this term finally. This is a presupposition which in many cases operates subconsciously in your mind. You read this and subconsciously you may think, well, what do you mean finally gets the attention? You mean that the sex life of the female fruit fly wasn't getting any attention before? And what has caused this major change in the way that we see the sex life of the female fruit fly? Be aware that when you use a headline like this, you really have to deliver in the article itself. You can't use a headline like this and then have a totally anticlimactic reason why the female fruit fly is getting attention. No pun intended. Again, here we have a comparison between these two examples. Now, let's read these two headlines. New book reveals rescue remedies for retailers. Compare that to, if you're a retailer in need of fresh ideas and proven growth strategies, this new book is for you. So in this second example, not only have they outlined their target market, their target audience. So if you're a retailer, immediately your attention, the light bulb is going off in your brain. Okay, they're talking to me in need of fresh ideas and proven growth strategies. Notice how specific this headline is compared to this one. This is very generic. It doesn't really jump out at you. Also, notice the typography. This is something we'll get into more detail in another video, but the typography here versus the typography here. This is much more informal. Now, that may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your audience and the type of content that you are writing. But just consider the difference in typography. Again, we will touch upon that in the relevant video. Moving on. Headlines. And this is from Copy Blogger. Another very good podcast to follow if you want to be an excellent copywriter. Headlines should be specific. Now, remember what we were saying. Specific. Unique. Now, this is most certainly unique. Specific and unique. Urgent. Well, in need of fresh ideas. There's a little bit of urgency here, but this could be improved in terms of urgency. And useful. If you're a retailer in need of fresh ideas and proven growth strategies. Problem. This is the book for you. Solution. Now, another point. Try to include the promise and the brand name in the headline. How to get your money back at Sears is a good example of how to do this. Again, this strategy is useful sometimes. Sometimes it's not really applicable for your audience or for the medium, for the type of content you're writing, I should say. Now, again, to emphasize that you can't always, you have to play around with these concepts. The average click-through rate on headlines with negative superlatives was a staggering 63% higher than that of their positive counterparts. Now remember what we read all the way back here at the very beginning of these notes. Negatively modified words don't work, never, less than, etc. Now, superlatives, again, always best. So, despite the fact that some research says one thing and other research says something else, you really have to play around with this for yourself. It's a difficult thing to teach because there's, as in a lot of industries, there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So, I get, in some cases, positive superlatives would be appropriate. In other cases, negative superlatives would be appropriate. Now, you should always test your headlines. Test your different headlines in many different ways. If you have the capacity to do A/B testing, absolutely do that. If not, just run it by a few people and get their opinion. And finally, snippets should be a unique summary of your article, and this is more in terms of Google, the Google snippets, which we will, or pardon me, these are the A/B testing. You should use different headlines in the A/B testing, but not too different, because if there is a noticeable improvement, we'll use an example here. How to get your money back at Sears. How to get a refund at Sears. You make a small change so you can test, okay, if I replace money with refund, does that cause a significant improvement in my click-through rate? So, just to recap, we've gone over a few examples of good headlines. We have also discussed a variety of theories and points and techniques that you can use to write better headlines. We've also outlined a very important homework assignment. Finding these good headlines, these great headlines, and trying to model them, mimic them, so you yourself are, through practice does make perfect, you will then be able to reproduce these fabulous headlines and therefore land those top copywriting contracts. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we will pick this up next time. Thanks again. If you have any feedback for me, please leave it in the discussion section of this video. Till next time.